Is passion enough to usher you into your life goals? What about having a mentor? Our guest artist this week is Spencer Meagher, a plein air watercolor artist who found his calling at a tender age of 12. He took a chance through a letter sent to an artist, which changed the course of his art journey and led him to be the artist, teacher, and mentor he is now. In this episode, Spencer and I talked about key elements of a good design, taking chances and risk in art, why having passion is a sure way to be successful in anything you desire to do, the importance of light and shadow in plein air painting, techniques and step by step process in painting landscapes. If you want to be part of the conversation, then send in your questions and topics you want us to cover to hello@etcherlab.com. Hey, this is Jessie from Etcher. We believe in your power to create, so we invited artists from all around the globe to inspire you to keep on creating. Join us in this journey and let's celebrate creativity. This is Make More Art, the podcast.
My first recollection of being interested in art and started drawing when I was, I'm going to say fourth or fifth grade in school. When I should have been listening in class, I was drawing in my notebooks and sketching what we called funny cars. They were the trend back then was to draw these animated race cars, if you will, that were almost had human features to them. But so that was my first recollection. And then somewhere along within a year or two of that, I began to develop an interest in birds or ornithology. And so I started drawing birds, and Roger Torrey Peterson was a bird artist, I guess. He created a field guide books that he did all the illustrations in them. And so I had one of those, and I copied his paintings first drawing them out in sketchbooks. And so that was really my first introduction to art and my first love. And from there, I wanted to become a wildlife artist, and I started painting. I'm trying to think. The first real painting I did, I think, was in acrylics.
Oh,
and
okay.
There's just been so many. Like I say, it's a long journey there. There's been so many influences when I was younger. There was a wildlife artist who was nationally known here in the country. I think back in the 70s when this was taking place, he was probably one of the top wildlife painters in the country. And I reached out to him one day, and this is before the internet. You sent a letter, and I was homesick from school when I was 12 years old, and I wrote him this letter, and I just explained who I was. I lived up in northern Minnesota in the Midwest here in the United States, and I just wrote him, and I told him I was interested in being an artist, a wildlife artist in particular. I loved his work. Would he look at my work? And about 6 weeks later, I get this big packet from him.
Oh, wow.
And it was of course, a letter in there, as well as some artist proofs that he had signed and sent to me and stuff. And he just basically told me, he said, I'm a very busy person. He said, and he offered me some suggestions, and those suggestions weren't viable. So long story short, I ended up sending him a small packet of my work, and he was kind enough to take and redraw everything I sent him and change the composition and the design. And at the time, I didn't realize it, but looking back and verbalizing it right now, he did for me what I try to do for our other artists who take my workshops and my classes. I try to impart to them the importance of a good design, because that's the backbone of any good painting. And I just think back, he gave me little rules. He said, never go with even numbers of birds or animals in a painting. Go with odd numbers because they balance out better. And, so, I mean, here's this guy who's one of the top painters in the country, taking time out of his very busy schedule to help a 12-year-old become a painter. And we communicated for probably 5 or 6 years.
Wow.
As I got into my teenage years, I discovered girls, and art was less important to me and things like that. But I remember one of the letters I had sent him, he wrote back to me, and he chastised me pretty hard. He said, you're either going to become a painter or you're not. And I mean, he scolded me. He basically said, you're being lazy, not hard, enough of passion for you right now, apparently. And he said, now you're going to do one of two things. He said, you're either going to get mad and fold up your sketchbook and walk away, he said, or you're going to pick yourself up out of the dirt, dust yourself off, and get after your art. And 40 years later, I still remember that letter. It really, it hurt, but it was the best thing I needed to hear too. So that's helped drive me through all the difficult times as an adult trying to be an artist too.
That's a very interesting story. You said that it was a long time ago, but you recounting that memory feels like it was just a few years back, especially that letter. And I'm glad that you found your mentor at a very young age and you took that courage to write that letter to that artist and that you look up to. And great thing as well that he replied, but he took the time, like what you said, out of his busy schedule to reply to a 12-year-old. That's really very kind and generous for him to do that. And the communication continued on for, you said, 6 years. And that letter sort of a make or break, which led you to become the artist that you are now. And I've interviewed a lot of artists here on the podcast, and each of you have their own stories of how you started. But so far, this one is very unique in a way because of that letter. And at the same time, at a very young age, you found the courage to really follow through with your passion.
Yeah,
so, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I guess it's just part of my makeup, but I'm never afraid to take a chance, like write to somebody like him, or there's been other examples in my life that they escape me at the moment. But I know there have been times when I'm willing to take a risk that other people think, well, you're crazy for doing that, and it usually pays off. And that's one thing I would tell people: if you feel something or you're passionate about something, go ahead and roll the dice. The worst that could have happened was he'd have thrown my letter in the trash and I'd never heard from him.
That's
but
true.
As it was, I got valuable insight from him, and I wouldn't say we were ever friends because I never did get to meet the man, but he helped me get up on the next rung of the ladder in my art career just by some tough love. They're telling me you better either get after it or get out.
Yeah, and sometimes we need that tough love, because it's easy to be complacent and say that, okay, this is a hobby and I can do that today, or I won't, and fill my time with other things. But that letter asks you to make a choice, make a decision whether this is who you want to be or not. And you made the right decision to pursue art. So,
and I would also say that there's nothing wrong with, you mentioned being a hobby painter. There's nothing wrong with being a hobby painter. Not everybody's cut out to do it at a professional level, and that's perfectly fine. Whatever level you want to paint at, or sculpt, or whatever a creative wants to do, whatever level they want to work at, that's where you need to be. If you love it, if it's part of your life, you'll naturally gravitate towards a higher proficiency in it.
Right. That's a really good point. Now, you did mention that you became you started with acrylic. Is that right, Spencer?
Yes. I just remember as 9-10 years old painting this. It was a bald eagle flying, and it was in acrylic. That's the only thing I remember about it.
Okay.
Why acrylic? Maybe that was the
one they had available at this time.
Something, that my mom could get me. I lost my father when I was 6 years old. So mom raised 4 kids as a single parent. And, I remember her struggles, and there were times she wasn't able to put a lot of food on the table, but she always managed find the funds to get me whatever art supplies that I needed. So she was probably my biggest not only supporter but encourager, as a child.
And I think that is a key factor to that ushered you to where you are right now. We've all heard that stories when, as a kid, you can see talent, right? That kid has this desire to pursue art, but then given the circumstances and this mindset that it's just a hobby, it's not something that you should pursue. Sometimes kids are not encouraged, they were not provided with the environment to pursue creativity or to pursue art. And I'm glad that your mom did, despite the circumstances surrounding it during that time. You said she managed to put some fun and to support you and encourage you, being your cheerleader in your art journey. So yeah, kudos to your mom. And I'm sorry for your dad losing him at a very young age.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about watercolor.
Yes.
When did you realize that this is something that this is a medium that I would want to pursue in your art journey?
So let me tell you quickly about a watercolor influence in my life.
Okay.
His name's Tom Hill. He's, again, back in the 70s, the 80s, he was probably one of the top watercolor instructors in the country.
Mm-hmm.
Taught workshops all over the world. And he was phenomenal watercolors. I lived out in Arizona, and the reason I got to know him was because he was a client or patient at the clinic where my mother worked.
Oh.
And so anyway, she knew him. I never did get to meet him, but she knew him, and she got to know his work, and she would tell me about it and tell me stories about talking with him, and she would talk with him about me. And so anyway, around about that time, he came out with a book. It's called Color for the Watercolor Painter. And he just painted with color. He didn't paint with a lot of detail. He's just to me such a phenomenal artist, because he could not only paint what's in front of him, but he could create a scene. Working plein air, working out on location. He would sketch figures and put them in there and doing different things. He was just such a phenomenal painter. So, he solely painted in watercolor at that time, and I really, really loved his work. And so I think that was the catalyst that piqued my interest in watercolor. And then the first watercolor I remember doing, I was 16 years old, and my mom had gone to see my sister. She lived in Europe at the time. And so me and my brother were holding down the fort back home, but somewhere in that window of time that she was gone, I remember doing this watercolor of a lighthouse. And from that point on, I always worked in watercolor. Now I work in other mediums now too, but for the bulk of my art career, 35 years, I've worked in watercolor all that time.
And I love that he started with Lighthouse, because when I look at your works, they're beautiful, by the way. And you do a lot of plein air painting,
yes,
right? And we'll talk about the awards in a bit. But the plein air, when did you discover that you enjoy painting outdoors?
Probably about 10 years ago. And it might have been a little farther back now, probably about 14 years ago. Somewhere around 2008, I got wind of a plein air competition, which, for those that don't know, plein air is just simply painting outside on location.
Thank you.
I like to broaden the context of it and say it's really painting from life or drawing from life. So by that, if you're working in a studio with a model or something, to me, that's still kind of the same thing. But for the purists, plein air is painting outside on location. So I found out about this event that was about an hour away from me, and I took my 12-year-old son over there with me. And so anyway, we both set up, and arrogance will bite you every time. So you got to be careful with it. And I remember going over there thinking, oh, I'm gonna go over there and just clean up with all these, because I just thought more of myself than I should have. Well, I got over there, and there were some great painters over there, and they just, to use a phrase, mopped the floor with me. I didn't get anything. My son, he actually won. I think he won first place in the youth division, but I didn't win anything. So I got humbled and put in my place, and that's a good thing. And it's another lesson, like that artist was telling me. He said, you're either going to get mad and quit, or you're going to get up and go at it again. So. But anyway, I always get a kick out of that story, because I was just so full of myself at that point in time. So that was my first plein air event. And then, like, the next year I found another one. I live in Illinois in the Midwest, and Indiana is just one state over. And so I went to this other event over there, and there were 100 and some artists painting there. And it was just such a good feeling to get to talk with all the other painters, as well as just working out in the fresh air, working from life. You see so much more when you're working from life. A camera can't begin to pick up the nuances in the shadows under a tree or something like that, but your eye will see that. And although you don't put all of that in, you just kind of package it all together. You see little aspects of it, and you incorporate that in your painting. And so at that event, though, I did win first place in watercolor. So
Yay. That was a great story. Yeah, that was a great story. And boy, your son, you said, at 12 years old, won an award, first place. So How many kids do you have, Spencer?
I have three. I have three kids.
Are they all into art like yourself?
My oldest son, the one that won that award, he is so talented in so many ways. Right now he's working a lot in stained glass, but he doesn't paint, but he does stained glass work.
Okay.
But he's a singer, an actor, a chef. Plays the violin. He's just one of those that's really been blessed with an overabundance of talent. My middle son, he's not really artistic, although when he was younger, I thought he had a shot at it, but he didn't have the passion for it. And to me, that's the number one thing. And then my daughter, she's the oldest child, and she works in a lot of fiber arts and things like that, from knitting to felting and different things.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, they each have carved their own path in life, and I try to encourage them and support them with, whatever they're working on.
Yeah, it's your turn now to provide that environment where your children are encouraged to create. Wow, very talented kids, taking it from your side, I guess, I would assume.
Yeah, there's not too many artists on my wife's side. So sometimes sometimes people that aren't artists, they struggle to understand what makes an artist tick. I think there'll be a lot of people listening to this that will get that. People just don't understand them. They appreciate what they do, but they just don't fully grasp it, what drives us.
Yeah. You talk about passion earlier, that it's key and it's very important. And I read in one article that it isn't something that you can manufacture. It has to come from within. And if you really want to do something, it will shine through if you really have the passion for it. Now, you've been an artist for a while, for a long time. How much have you evolved all these years? You mentioned that you have changed subjects from then to now. Now you're more into plein air and painting from life. So what would you say would be how you evolve as an artist? What has changed all these years for you, Spencer?
I've been painting for 45 years now, maybe longer than that, probably close to 50. I used to go for hyper realism. Particularly when I was doing birds and things like that. I don't have any desire to do that anymore. Even if I sit down to occasionally I'll still paint a bird or something like that, or somebody's pet or something like that. I don't go for the realism. I might put all my energy if I want anything to be realistic, like if it's a cat or a dog or something, I might put all that energy into the eyes to make them look, really, really moist and lifelike. And then as I get away from that, I just kind of diminish the detail and everything.
I see. Okay.
But I mean, so much changes, and it better change, or you're not growing as an artist, in my opinion. Like subject matter, I'll paint anything because the subject I'm really painting is the light and the interaction of the light on an object and the shadows that it creates, so my subject, they'll say, well, do you like landscapes? Do you like, do you paint portraits, whatever?
I saw dogs as well. Yeah, I saw dog
it's just the play of the light on it is what catches my attention. So it could be a vase, it could be a person that's having bright sunlight hit them on this side of the face. It could be it could be a dumpster or something, a trash can in an alley. And if the light's cutting down through the alley the right way, and that trash can become the center of interest in that painting, not by virtue of what it is, but by virtue of how the light is hitting it and interacting with it.
Mm-hmm. I think that it shows in your works as well. And you did mention the play of light and how it is hitting the subject or the object that you're trying to paint.
Mm-hmm.
How important is light, Spencer? Because I know for a lot of art, especially for beginners, that is something that we struggle with. I'm not sure how to position it, whether is it really something that's difficult, or is there a technique to be able to achieve that light hitting the object and how it is reflected into your painting? Is there a trick that you can share with us on how to achieve that, or at least reflect that in our painting? Mm-hmm.
Okay, so for me, something that is brightly illuminated, like right now, the sun is shining outside. It's a beautiful day here in springtime. And I'm probably going to go out and try to do some plein air painting after a while. And a day like today for me is much easier to paint than an overcast day.
Uh-huh.
And because you have basically hard edges that are created by the way the light falls on something. If it was a foggy day outside or really overcast or rainy, everything is subdued. The color saturation is diminished. The hard edges disappear. And for me, it's easier to paint something that has stark contrast on it. So then from there, what I would recommend people look for is figure out how you can break whatever it is you're painting up into 3 or 4 large shapes. Find a like if sunlight's hitting the side of a building. Okay, you got that bright side of the building, and then you got the shadow side, and then you may have some trees and sky around that. I isolate those shapes, but by virtue of keeping it simple like that, there's light interacting on all the leaves on the trees and different things like that. But they are, if you try to paint all that in there, it's going to just clutter up the painting and make it too busy. So you want to just find those large shapes, and the light and the dark will do that for you. And start by painting that. And then when you get towards the end of your painting, then you can embellish it with a few more details. But I work to keep it simple, and I think that's just the way I'm personally wired. That's why I like the interaction of light and dark, because it automatically makes it simpler for me.
Right. Simplicity. I think that's a key word from what you just said, because most of the time, for especially for beginners side, we want everything all together. We want to paint everything that we can see.
Yeah,
but hearing you talk about simplifying things, working with shapes, it will allow us to focus on things, and the composition would really show when it's not too cluttered. And it's simplified, like what you said, by starting out with shapes and playing with the contrast of dark and light. talking about because you've recently taught with us, you have shared your during the live demo. So the mini workshop is happening this Friday. So upon this recording, you're probably watching or listening to this recording on a Monday, and Spencer has already done his mini workshop. So you better check out the link that is posted on the site on this episode on their show notes. But for your mini workshop, Spencer, rather, what is it that you will be teaching our students?
Okay, so I in my live demo, I focused on teaching gradient washes, particularly a sky wash, and we'll carry on with some of that in this mini workshop. But what I want to focus on in the mini workshop is taking a scene and doing exactly what I just talked about, simplifying it, isolating these. I guess isolating is the right word, but basically combining similar values into a common shape, and that's going to simplify it down. So I've got something here I could show you that.
Yes, please. Yes.
Okay. This is one of the things I'm going to utilize with in the workshop that's coming up. Okay, so you can see this right here.
Yeah.
Okay, so up in the sky area, we're going to focus on loose two things: loose painting, a lot of moisture up in here, but we'll also focus on negatively painting around these trees here. And that's negative painting is a very powerful tool. But also you can see how I've taken just this photograph and used a Sharpie or a marker to outline the common shapes in there. So I've simplified it. We've got one shape here, another greenish shape here. We got this orangish shape, which the trees morph into this grain silo right here, which comes around and goes back up in here. So a man-made hard object, an organic natural object here, but yet they are the same shape, they're part of the same shape.
Yeah, same shape. Yeah, same color.
And so that is, that's going to be the essence of this workshop. And then, of course, brushwork and mixing colors. We'll talk about color theory and, why I choose a certain color to go next to another color, because it's going to make it appear brighter, more intense, or something like that.
This is an interesting. I think you nailed it, especially the foundational technicalities of painting, especially the contrast. So this is some of the things that, as a beginner, we often missed out. But I believe through this mini workshop that you will be doing and sharing with our students, they will be able to grasp this foundational skills, which is very important and key for them to be able to achieve a painting, especially for landscapes. So if you are keen to learn more about what Spencer has shared with us in this episode, then go ahead and watch the recording. We will again put in the link on this episode and on our show notes. So Spencer, teaching. I know you have done workshops. I've seen some photos on the ground wherein you have conducted physical workshops, and I'm not sure how or what is the situation over there. You're in, did you say Illinois right now, or?
Illinois, Midwest.
Okay, I'm not sure what the situation is right now in terms of the pandemic, but have you? Because you've always done physical workshop, right? Have you done any online workshop as well, given the...
Yeah, with COVID, of course, that shut everything down.
Yeah.
And everybody was scrambling, trying to figure out how life goes on, when you're not supposed to leave your house. So I've some of the locations that I have taught in-person workshops before, I've met with them, and we figured we would try some Zoom workshops, and they've actually gone real well. And my opinion is online teaching like Zoom and StreamYard and just all the different formats that are out there, it's not going away. It's just another tool now in the teaching toolbox. it doesn't replace in-person teaching, but we've honed our skills where the cameras do a good job, and we've learned how to light, and so
Yes.
you get a really good experience at a very minimal price. And for
That's
those
true.
that can't travel, don't want to travel, don't have the resources to travel, they can take an online class. It's good. But like I said, it doesn't replace in person. I still like in person teaching, where I can walk around, where I can I can point to a student's painting an area that I think is really good, or an area that's maybe a little bit weak, and I can sit down and paint on it if they're willing to let me do that. I'm happy to make a few adjustments for them. But yeah, teaching, I really love to teach, and I find like one of my flaws is sometimes I give too much information. In other words, the students are not experienced enough to absorb everything that I'm throwing at them, and so I'm always trying to put on the brakes and keep it as simple as I can.
Okay.
And so that's why I think, like talking about simplifying shapes, if they can get that, well, they can do a whole lot better job than if they're trying to paint every leaf on the tree, so to speak.
I'm sure our audience and our students will benefit a lot from your class. Now, let's go back quickly to teaching. I remember referencing back to the story earlier from your mentor when you were 12, and he giving you tips and providing feedback on your works, redesigning, you said, recreating your works and showing you how important design is. Now, in your teaching style, is it something that you also adapted? I'm asking because I want to understand what your teaching style, although you touched on this a little bit earlier, that you tend to give a little bit more information, but you're now learning how to put on the brakes and simplifying things. But do you also show some tough love to your students as well? Or what is your teaching style in terms of providing feedback as well?
Okay. Yeah, that's a good question, because I won't tell an untruth to a student, but I will try to find a way to package the truth where it's palatable. Okay.
Yeah.
So we always start by bringing out the good points. If somebody gets called into the boss's office to be reprimanded, they try to build them up first before they let them down. So I try to find I try to find the good points in a painting, and even within the weaker areas of a painting, I try to find the good stuff that's going on there, and then offer suggestions that, if this color was warmer or cooler, or if you had a little more blue in it, or something like that, or it's awful busy. One of the things that pops in my mind right now is I'll show them, and I always take them through the painting step by step, so they get to watch me do a given area before they ever do it. And many times they will still just follow their own path, and like if it's trees, I'll treat this whole shape with a dull variety of colors, basically. Not a lot of little brush strokes. Well, then I go over and look at theirs, and they've got all these brush strokes going on there because they've tried to put all the leaves in and everything.
Yeah.
And I'll try to find a gentle way to say, look, this just is really busy in here, and it's distracting to my eye. Why don't you take your brush and wash over that and try to knock some of that down?
Yeah.
And so that's how I try to communicate what they need to correct in their painting.
I think it's a good way to provide feedback, because that's really the role of a teacher, right? To be able to guide the students and to give honest feedback that will make them better. And I think you're very effective at that, given your experience and the number of people that you have taught in your career. Now, this is your full time. You're doing art full time. Is that right, Spencer? Yes. Okay. Wow, amazing. And given this length of time that you have been painting, is there something that probably a practice or a way of working within art that you would say challenge or a belief that most people do when, especially when working with watercolor, that personally you would say, I want to challenge that because, or something that you don't necessarily believed in, if there is one thing.
In other words, commonly held beliefs within the painting world that I would challenge. I might not agree with, or right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, one that comes to mind, I hear people say that there's no such thing as talent. And you talked about talent earlier in this interview, and I would politely disagree with them on that. I'm a person of faith, so I believe that my talent is God-given, and I believe I have talent. But to that end, I think that passion that we were talking about is a huge part of that talent. Now, I believe anybody can learn to draw, anybody can learn to paint, but it's the passion linked with that talent that's going to carry you through the times when you've painted your fourth terrible painting in a row and you've thrown it in the trash and you think this is stupid. Why am I even wasting my time? And you want to walk away from it, but that passion that's in you, it's integral. It pulls you back to it. I've got to go. I've got to try again. I've been doing my painting full time since 2014. But for the 30 years prior to that, I was raising a family. I had a day job. I was doing all sorts of different things, and my art would take a back seat. Sometime for months at a time, maybe 6 months, I wouldn't paint. But there's something in me that I always had to come back to it, and that's craft it how you will, but I link that into the talent aspect of it. And I hear some people say, anybody can learn to draw wonderful and be great. Yes, you can be taught things, but you've got to have that inner drive, which I would term as talent and the passion. So,
thank you for sharing that, Spencer. I absolutely agree, specifically with passion. I think in everything that we do, we have been given gifts and talents, but it's up to us to cultivate that and use it.
Yes.
And in your case, more than using that talent and cultivating it, you're also sharing it with other people through teaching your techniques and sharing it with anyone who would want to kickstart their art journey. So it's been wonderful chatting with you, Spencer, and I'm excited for your mini workshop. The mini workshop is happening on March 4th. This episode is airing on March 7th. So if you watched Spencer's live demo, I'm sure you're pretty interested to learn more about his techniques and from the things that he shared on this episode. I'm sure you have gotten a lot of nuggets of trinkets of wisdom from Spencer. So if you would like to learn more about his techniques and paint just like Spencer, then go ahead and watch the recording of his mini workshop that is on the Etcher Studio website. Before we wrap up, Spencer, is there anything that you would like to leave with our audience, especially for anyone who is probably kickstarting or on the verge of starting to create or make art? What sort of like golden nuggets or pieces of advice that you would like to share with them?
I think don't be afraid to fail. It's when you fail, that's when you learn the most. And I had written down here in my notes here about experimenting, and it's taken me years, if not decades, to give myself the license to experiment and try doing different things. And when you may have a vision for something, a new way to apply paint or a new technique or something, and it's probably not going to turn out great the first time, but that's how you got to be not afraid to make those mistakes, and that's how you will shine as an artist. That's how, to use another cliche, you'll find your voice as an artist. Your work will stand out from other artists. And that's one thing I've learned. You've got you can't paint like everybody else. Anybody that takes my classes, I don't want you to paint like me. I just want you to pick up possibly one or two new techniques that you didn't know about and then apply them however you see fit. Because if you paint like me, you're doing yourself an injustice. Learn to paint. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, and find out who you are as an artist.
Wise words from Spencer. Thank you so much for sharing that. I guess it's that courage to not to be afraid to fail. Spencer, thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us. That story from childhood, that is just priceless. And for all the techniques and pieces of advice that you've shared with our audience, I'm sure they are all excited to watch your mini workshops. So please continue doing what you love. You're inspiring a lot of people. And I hope to speak with you again. Simply take care of yourself. And thank you again for taking the time to speak with me and to be part of the Make More Art podcast.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Take care, Spencer.
Okay.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. That was a good trip down memory lane with Spencer. He inspired me to push forward, to take it on and make it happen, to not be afraid to make mistakes even, because he's absolutely right. What's the worst thing that could happen? So what about you? Are you ready to take the leap? Do let us know through the comments associated with this podcast at etcherlab.com/Spencer. We would love to hear your thoughts, so please drop us a 5-star review on the Apple Podcast, or you can find us on YouTube at Etcher Studio. And hitting the subscribe button is greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll catch you again next time. Until then, let's make more art.